All right, listener name, let's dive right in. Have you ever wondered if a religion can say it has the only truth, but also really want peace in the world? We're going deep into chapter 1 of Timothy Keller's The Reason for God to unpack this really interesting dilemma.
Yeah, and Keller gets right to it in this chapter. He starts with a conversation with these two young New Yorkers, Blair and Jeff, who ask him point blank,
Yeah.
if a religion claims to have the exclusive path to God, isn't that automatically going to cause division?
Right, it seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? Saying we have the only truth and also we want everyone to get along. It's something a lot of people struggle with, and for good reason.
Totally. And Keller acknowledges that. He gets where they're coming from. He even admits that having this idea of exclusive truth can easily lead to thinking you're better than others. He calls it a slippery slope, but then he throws in a curveball. He says that Christianity, especially traditional Christianity, actually has some built-in ways to fight against that very problem.
Safeguards. Okay, now I'm really interested. What kind of safeguards? Does he think other religions have these too?
He focuses on Christianity here. He says before we even get to those safeguards, we have to address the elephant in the room. People have tried to get rid of the whole religion causes division problem in a few different ways. Outlaw religion completely, say it's inherently bad, or try to push it into this private corner where it won't bother anyone.
Outlawing religion. That
Right.
seems like trying to stop a hurricane with a fly swatter, doesn't it?
Exactly. Keller uses the example of what happened in China. When you try to suppress religion, you usually just end up pushing it underground, which sometimes makes it even stronger. It's like when you tell a kid they can't have a certain toy, suddenly it's the only thing they want.
Right, makes sense. So if we can't just make religion disappear, what about that whole argument that all religions are equal? A lot of people seem to think that's the answer for world peace.
Keller addresses that one head on. He talks about being on a panel with a rabbi and an imam, and they were discussing the differences between their faiths. That's where this all religions are equal idea starts to fall apart.
I'll bet. I can only imagine how those conversations could get a little tense. Were there any disagreements that really stood out?
Well, Keller talks about this one student who challenged him. The student argued that claiming one religion is closer to the truth than another is intolerant, that it's more about just being a good person and not about specific beliefs. But Keller points out that there's a kind of paradox in that statement.
Okay, now I have to know. What's the paradox? I'm hooked.
Well, think about it. To say doctrines don't matter
Mm.
is actually making a claim about God. It's like saying that if God exists, he doesn't care about what we believe. And that goes directly against what many religions, including Christianity, teach at their core. So it's a bit self-contradictory.
Wow, I never thought of it like that before. It's like you're making a statement about belief by saying beliefs don't matter.
Exactly. And then Keller tackles another analogy people use all the time, the blind man and the elephant. That idea that each religion is just experiencing a different part of the same elephant, so they all possess part of the truth.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one a million times. But I have a feeling Keller's not buying it.
Not really. He argues that if you're going to say each religion only has a piece of the truth, you'd have to be able to see the whole elephant yourself. Right? You need to have that objective viewpoint to be able to judge that.
It's like those blind men are all saying, I've got a piece of the truth, but they'd need to be able to see to even know they're all touching the same elephant, let alone whether they only have a piece of the truth.
Exactly. The point Keller's making is that claiming no religion sees the full picture is kind of like claiming that you can see the full picture. It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
Okay, so we've established that we can't just get rid of religion or say it's all the same. But then there's this idea that maybe it's all just about where you come from, you know? Like you inherit your beliefs, so they can't really be objectively true.
Right, that's a popular one. Keller brings in some big names here, scholars like Peter Berger and Alvin Plantinga. They argue that this everything is relative idea kind of falls apart when you think about it.
How so? On the surface, it seems like a pretty neat solution. Everyone's beliefs are equally valid because it's all just perspective.
It sounds good,
Mm.
but even saying all religions are equally false is making a claim about truth.
Yeah.
To call something false, you need some standard of truth to measure it against. It's another one of those paradoxes.
So it sounds like we're saying no matter how you look at it, we're all coming from some kind of belief system, whether we realize it or not.
Exactly. And trying to erase those beliefs, especially in the name of tolerance, isn't just unrealistic, it can actually be harmful.
So where does that leave us then? If we can't just ignore or erase these religious differences, how do we keep them from turning into conflict and division? What's the alternative?
Well, this is where Keller gets really interesting. He says that within Christianity itself, especially in the idea of God's grace and forgiveness, there's a powerful counterforce to the dangers of exclusivity.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. Tell me more. How does grace actually promote peace and humility?
It all comes down to how Christianity views salvation. You see, unlike some religions where you have to earn your way to God through good deeds or rituals, Christianity teaches that we are saved by grace. It's a free gift, not because of anything we've done.
I'm familiar with that concept, but I'm not sure I see how that translates into actually treating others better, especially people who believe different things than you.
Well, if salvation is a gift, not something you earn, it totally changes how Christians should view themselves and others. It breeds humility. In fact, Keller says that Christians should actually expect to find non-Christians who are more moral than them.
That's definitely not something you hear every day. It kind of turns the whole idea of religious superiority on its head.
Exactly. It suggests that having faith isn't about being a better person. It's about recognizing your need for grace and then extending that same grace to everyone else.
That's really profound. So instead of fearing this idea of religious exclusivity, Keller's saying it can actually create more humility and through that, more peace.
Precisely. He even points to the early Christians. Despite believing in one true God, they were known for being radically inclusive and compassionate. They cared for the sick, the poor, anyone who was marginalized. It didn't matter what they believed.
Their actions really spoke for themselves. It's like their faith wasn't about building walls to separate themselves from others, but about building bridges to connect with them.
What a great way to put it. And it all stemmed from this belief in a God who loved everyone, even his enemies. It makes you wonder if in our modern attempts to be tolerant, we might actually be creating more distance by avoiding these deeper conversations about faith and truth.
That's an interesting thought. It's like we're so worried about offending someone that we end up avoiding any real conversation at all.
It's a tough balance, for sure. And to be fair, Keller admits that Christianity hasn't always gotten this right. He acknowledges all the awful things that have been done in the name of religion, and Christianity is no exception.
True, there's a dark side to religious history for sure. But it sounds like he's suggesting that maybe, just maybe, there are things within these belief systems, resources for peacemaking and respect, that we're just overlooking.
Exactly. He's not saying Christianity is the only way to peace, but it offers a different perspective, a unique set of values that could help make the world a more peaceful place.
It's about recognizing that our core beliefs really do affect how we treat each other.
Right.
And within Christianity, he sees something powerful that can combat that self-righteousness, that can poison relationships, whether it's between people of different faiths or no faith at all.
And that's what I find so compelling about his argument. It's not about making everyone believe the same things. It's about recognizing that what we believe really does matter.
It's funny. We usually think of humility as this weak or passive thing, but the way Keller describes it, humility becomes this force for good.
Yeah, totally. It goes against our natural instinct to see things as us versus them. But that radical humility is really at the core of what he's talking about. Recognizing our own flaws and weaknesses while still celebrating the good we see in others, even if we don't agree with everything about them.
It's like that saying, be kind, everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. You never know what someone else is going through.
Exactly. And when we assume the worst about people, especially those with different beliefs, it just pushes us further apart.
Yeah.
Keller seems to be saying that maybe, just maybe, a little more grace and a little less judgment could help bridge those gaps.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Keller's ideas, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from all of this?
I think for me, it's that we can't be afraid to have these conversations about faith and truth, even when they make us uncomfortable. It's in those tough conversations, those places where we disagree, that real growth and understanding can happen.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about pretending our differences don't exist. It's about figuring out how to navigate them with humility and respect.
Absolutely.
This has really given me a lot to think about. That idea of grace being a catalyst for humility has really stuck with me. It seems counterintuitive at first, but it makes so much sense.
It does, doesn't it? It's like a paradox. But I think that's what makes it so powerful. It makes us rethink our assumptions about faith, truth, even tolerance.
It really does. It makes you wonder, what if instead of seeing religion as the opposite of peace, we started looking at it as a force for peace? Keller focuses on Christianity, but it makes you think, what other beliefs are out there, religious or not, that might offer a similar path to peace?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What are the core beliefs, the values that have the power to inspire real humility, empathy, respect for others? And how do we cultivate those not just in our own lives, but in the world around us.
It's definitely a challenge, especially in today's world where it feels like everything is so black and white. It's easy to get caught up in judging those we disagree with.
Yeah, it's easy to get discouraged. But I do think there's hope in what Keller's saying. He's suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the way to a more peaceful world isn't about erasing our differences. Maybe it's about facing them head on with more humility, more grace, and a willingness to really listen to and learn from each other.
That's a great note to end on. So, listener name, as you continue to think about these things, we're curious. What resonates most with you from Keller's perspective? What other belief systems, religious or secular, come to mind that might offer similar paths to peacemaking? This has been a great deep dive. Thanks for joining us. It's these kinds of conversations, grappling with the tough questions, that remind us how powerful ideas can be. Until next time, keep asking those questions and seeking out diverse perspectives.